my name is Caleb Bosley, and I'm going to be talking about why cochlear implants are not a good idea for students and their families, and children and their families, and those who have hearing disabilities. According to the National Institute on Deafness and Other Communication Disorders, 100,000 people had cochlear implants, including 40,000 of those kids being, including 40,000 of those being kids as of 2012. I have had to learn a lot about cochlear implants and different hearing methods, as I personally myself struggle with hearing, as I have a hearing aid as I constantly wear it, and am partially deaf and a part of the hard of hearing community. The reason as to why cochlear implants are not a good idea is that there is a long process of speech therapy that isn't always successful for those who get a cochlear implant. There is a viewpoint of being treated as a medical patient instead of being a human, and a feeling of inadequacy can develop because of that, and having the hearing population control the deaf culture and those who are deaf. This can be a very big impact on their scale, and we've seen it before in our history, and it's never worked. So my first point, speech therapy is very expensive and very lengthy for those who get a cochlear implant. And it's not always successful. There can be a lengthy amount of period between getting a cochlear implant and understanding what sounds mean. Like, we all know what an A sounds like because we've been trained to understand what that sounds like over time from birth. And however, when you start somebody off, let's say a 10-year-old starts off and they learn sign language, and then they have to learn the language of English with A's, and the sounds and what words make those sounds, and have to understand what those words mean in relation to them, and they have to understand the meaning that are behind those words. Cochlear implants, like I said, they make people hear, but they're not actively listening, and you have to train somebody for a long, long time before they understand and are even approaching equality to those who have their hearing by birth and don't have a hearing aid or a cochlear implant, anything to that extent to help them. They still need to make a connection to their meaning and sounds that they hear, and that they need to be taught that and have that for a long, long time, and that oftentimes develops with a special relationship with a speech therapist or pathologist and somebody who is deaf who has a cochlear implant. And it's a long, expensive process that can take years and years, and be a process that can be very frustrating and damaging on a deaf individual. Nancy Ty Murray, Linda Spencer, and George G. Woodworth are all ear doctors from the University of Iowa, and they back this up by saying in the article, in the acquisition of speech by children who have prolonged cochlear implants experience, that they confirm that having kids between two cultures can be extremely dangerous for them. So you already have a kid who's in the deaf culture and doesn't know language, like they know sign language, and they know that culture, but then they have to turn that around and go into a speaking culture that they don't understand and that they don't know. How can this be beneficial for them to be between these two cultures that is implemented because of a cochlear implant? It's a very dangerous situation for them to be in, because they are trapped between these two cultures, which can lead to a lack of identity, which can cause self-issues later on in life and questioning their own identity and during times of later development, when that should not be the case. Furthermore, with that, there can be a sense that deaf and hard of hearing are only viewed as patients and as people who should be treated as such. There is a growing fear that the hearing culture is trying to diminish the deaf culture. Alexander Graham Bell, the inventor of the telephone, was very much for pushing an oralist perspective, and for speaking, and for having deaf children learn using speaking and using lip reading, and not being very expressive with what they show their language, such as speaking and language, like such as sign language, and being very visual with what they learn. Furthermore, with that, that is shown in Carol A. Patton and Tom Humphrey's book Inside Deaf Culture on page 72. There's a quote saying, "People who listen more carefully to others, speaking on behalf of the deaf, but not deaf people themselves." So there is this increased attention on those who are deaf and hard of hearing, especially as it relates to cochlear implants, but not on the deaf people themselves. It's not a direct translation as to who wants what. It is oftentimes a very translated way for that to be expressed, and for speaking people literally speaking on behalf of the hard of hearing and deaf culture. So that is very difficult and hard in a society that pushes for equality and advocacy and those qualities, to not have a true group represented by that. Again, so these are the things that make a cochlear implant can be dangerous to children. One of them being there is a long time for speech therapy and speech learning and pathology, and a very expensive route at that might not always be successful. There is a increased control of the hearing culture over the deaf culture, and that there is a view that the deaf culture is only viewed as patients. I really just hope that everybody can understand that there is a underrepresented group in the deaf and hard of hearing culture, and that I hope that there are more people who can be passionate about this topic, especially during this time of equality that has been heavily pushed recently with the Black Lives Matter movement. And I hope everybody finds something that they can be passionate about and advocate for, and understanding that there are biases to every situation, and that everything can be improving, but we need to work towards that together, equal as one. Thank you for your time today. Alright, here are my index cards. There's the first one, and the backside's blank. You see through, I swear. The second one, and the back is blank. Third one, back is blank.